Michael, where's my deck? I need it for... What the fuck is this? Why do you have my deck?
Hello, Sheriff. I have a trade offer. Your precious deck. Or gambling. You could make all your money.
We're not fucking doing that. Give me back my deck, and never pull this shit again, okay? See you later, clean up the mess. So because I've already talked about Orfist on this channel, in fact, literally just recently, you can still watch that video and get a full understanding for the deck that I'm playing today. On the other hand though, I haven't talked about Drajeweled in a hot minute, so for the intro I'll be discussing it instead. Drajeweled is a deck that focuses on amassing a ton of soul, often using precise skills to cherry pick the exact cards they need, as its main ability involves soul blasting 4 cards with different grades to lower the opponent's Vanguard's power. The original Drajeweled can soul blast 4 cards with different grades to lower the opponent's power down to 1, which of course means that they need to guard a whole lot more, and this will also remove any defensive triggers they got before Drajeweled attacked. Because the opponent is left with exactly 1 power, they pretty much just need to match the opponent's power and guard, because the extra 1 will put them on top. As of D set 13 though, Drajeweled has evolved into a grade 4, Drajeweled Ignis. This means he performs triple drive, loses Persona Ride, but gets a slew of new powerful effects. The first of which is that at the start of battle phase, you choose 2 cards from your drop zone and put them into soul. Then, if you have 4 more cards with different grades in soul, your entire front row gets 15,000 power. This doesn't work like Persona Ride power, but the extra 5k makes it a bit more worth it. And then on attack, you can soul blast 5 cards with different grades, with Drajeweled's counting as anything you want, to retire all your opponent's back row rear guards, give Drajeweled an extra critical, and set the power of all your opponent's front row units to 0, meaning they no longer get the safety net of the 1 power that allows them to guard by just matching power. Beginning with the ride line, Jewel Core Dragon is your grade 1, and when rode upon he can call himself to rear guard. When he attacks or boosts, he gives himself 5,000 power, but at end of battle he goes back to soul. Jewel Kneel when landing his attack allows you to soul charge 1, and when rode upon allows you to soul charge 1 and then draw a card if you have 3 or more cards in your soul with different grades. Drajeweled also has a variety of strong rear guards, as you'll see in Dan's deck list right here. Nocturcio, on call, if you have a grade 4 Vanguard or can reveal 1 from your hand, allows you to counterblast 1 to draw a card and put 2 cards from drop zone into soul, which is already immensely valuable soul setup. Not only that, but when you discard him to ride to grade 3, you draw a card. Next is Forbidal, a 1 of, because it's a Regalis piece, that lets you search your deck for up to 2 cards. Up to 1 grade 4 that'll be added to hand, and up to 2 grade 3s that'll be called to rear. A mainstay of this is Ristelgaler, another 1 of that, when attacking, so long as you soul blasted 4 or more for a cause, lets you put a card from hand into soul to draw a card and retire an opponent's rear guard. Next is Tizcar, with a really bad on-call effect, but a really good when guarding effect. When discarded or guarding from hand, lets you Energy Blast 3 or Counterblast 1 to draw a card, which is always valuable, even as a cycler or just a defensive piece. Next is Zagon, a grade 2 that when placed on rear during main phase allows you to soul charge 1, and then if you have a grade 4 Drajeweled Vanguard or can reveal a grade 4 from hand, allows you to call a card from soul to rear and then at end of turn, put it back into soul. So long as you have a Vanguard with Drajeweled, he also gets boost. Rock Augur, a mainstay for the deck through all its iterations, can once per turn when attacking a grade 3 or greater give itself 10k so long as you have 4 cards in soul with different grades. You can also counterblast 1 to restand himself on rear when you soul blast 4 or more for a cost. Next is a new addition, Bifrons. On call from hand, counterblast 1 to check top 3. 1 of them goes into hand, the other goes into soul, and the rest gets discarded. The rest of the effect is only for all Magisters, so we don't really care about it. The first effect is plenty fine, though honestly please Bush just make all Magister good. It's way cooler than it deserves to be, and I want to be able to play it. The Demon Twink there, Varpula, can put himself from rearguard into soul to draw a card when you soul blast 4 or more at the same time for a cost. Then, either by having a grade 4 Drajeweled Vanguard or revealing 1 from hand, allows you to restand a rearguard so long as you haven't restood a rearguard by an effect this turn. This combos with Rock Augur pretty well, and also keeps the deck not too insane. When you use Drajeweled's effect, you activate Varpula, putting him into soul and restand your rearguard, and then counterblasting 1 for Rock Augur to restand himself, giving you a full 5 attack combo just the same way you would if you were using 2 Rock Augur, but for 1 counterblast less. You can keep recalling him with Zagon, and since you draw a card for using his skill, it's pretty beneficial to do so. The deck's main strategy is to use Drajeweled's effects to keep the opponent at a low power and make their attacks even more deadly. On top of that, using all the various skills its rearguards have that either help to set up Drajeweled or just get stronger whenever you use Drajeweled's effect. To quickly explain my deck if you don't want to watch the other video, I focus on setting up as many world orders as possible, and then using Orfist Masques effect. On attack, counterblasting 1 and removing any number of world orders from my order zone to call a 15,000 power Shadow Army token over top of any rearguard that I control up to the number of world orders I removed. If I call 2 or more, Orfist gets an extra drive check. And of course I also have my own rearguards. Parxis Dragon on call can Soul Blast 1 to set a world order for my drop zone that I don't already have set, and when put into drop zone during battle phase, allows me to draw a card so long as I have Dark Knight or Abyssal Dark Knight. which basically just means I need to have a World Order still alive. And Opart, which can counterblast 1 to search my deck for any World Order and discard it, and then when retired, call herself another token. Here's my deck list for the deck I was playing today. And if either of these decks have interested you, you should check out Ronin Cards, the channel's very own sponsor. It's a fine store for fine cards that you can use to support me. Use the link in the description to find the store and use code SHERIFF for 5% off your order. Thank you again to Ronin Cards for the sponsor, and thank you to anyone who checks it out to help support me and my channel. I definitely appreciate it. And now with all that said, let's get to the fight. Starting things off, Dan rides Jewel Core Dragon and passes his turn. Onto my turn, I ride Routus, and with its effect, search my deck for a World Order. And then I draw, charge 3, and then start attacking. On Dan's next turn, he rides Jewel Kneel and uses his grade 1 skill and soul to call to a rearguard, providing a booster. A pretty valuable play since Jewel Kneel on hit allows you to soul charge 1. At end of battle that Jewel Core attacked or boosted, he goes back to soul. On my turn, I ride and then elect to thin out the deck a little bit by calling Cyber Kite Tool, making a Dragon Tree marker and searching my deck for another Mask order. The marker will be useful because any rearguard on the circle, so long as I have a Mask Vanguard, gets 5k. I know it doesn't look like I shuffled my deck there, but trust me I did. If you're new here, I usually cut out mundane stuff like shuffling or searching through the deck just to make the video go by faster. I also use Hollowing Moonlit Night, Soul Blasting 1 to draw a card. You may actually remember Dan from a previous video in which I played Drajeweled versus him, and ironically in the time that's passed, he actually bought my deck off of me, but I mean, considering how much it's changed by now, it's kind of a Theseus's deck situation. Dan rides Drajeweled, and using the skill of Nocturcio when discarded to ride a grade 3, he draws a card. Also using Jewel Kneel's skill, when rode upon he gets a soul charge 1, and since his soul has 3 or more different grades, he gets to draw a card. Dan then calls Nocturcio, revealing a grade 4 in his hand to activate his effect of counterblasting 1 to draw a card and put 2 cards from drop into soul. Next he calls Zagon, using its skill to soul charge 1, and because he already has that grade 4 in hand, he gets to call something from his soul to rear. At end of turn though, it'll be going back to soul, but on rearguard it's nice because it has boost. Using Zagon, he calls Ristal Galer, which will allow him to retire a rearguard, and then he calls Varpula, which will allow him to restand a rearguard. Using Drajeweled's skill, on attack he can Soul Blast 4 with different cards to lower my Vanguard's power down to 1 for the rest of the turn. I'm on grade 2 though, so Drajeweled doesn't give himself an extra critical. Varpula's skill goes off now because he Soul Blasted 4 or more at once to put himself into soul and restand a rearguard. I managed to score myself a heal trigger, which is nice that I get to heal the damage, but the extra power isn't actually going to help that much compared to the other attacks coming my way. Unfortunately enough, damage triggers don't fix a bad hand. Onto my turn, I stand and draw, and ride Orfist Regis, using its skill to activate a World Order from the drop zone, in this case Hollowing, which allows me to draw a card. I then waste no time and activate Maskified Dragonman drop zone, allowing me to Persona ride Orfist Masques. I then call Opart, using her skill to counterblast 1 and search my deck for any World Order to discard. In this case, Overcoming an Eternity, which will give all my tokens 5k for the turn they're called. I then decide to use the counterblast I've been given and use Habitable Zone, on call counterblasting 1 to search my deck for any set order I want and add it to hand. Not only that, but I can play 2 orders this turn, and the next set order I play is free. I grab another Overcoming an Eternity, but I don't use it just yet because I want to use Polarxis first. On call I can Soul Blast 1 to activate a World Order from my drop zone that I don't already have set, meaning if I'm going to use it to play that Overcoming an Eternity, I gotta do him first. I'm then finally actually using my order per turn to Soul Blast 1 and activate Hollowing Moonlit Night, allowing me to draw. Which means yeah, the first 3 that I played weren't my order per turn, they were all cheated in by some effect, or were given to me as an extra play per turn at the cost of free. Dan gets a defensive draw trigger pretty early on, but with Orfist effect when attacking, I can counterblast 1 and remove any number of World Orders from my order zone to call a token to an occupied rearguard circle for each one I removed. If I call 2 or more, Orfist gets an extra drive check. In this case, I only elect to remove 2 so that I can call a token over Polarxis and Opart. With Polarxis' effect, because I have Dark Knight or Abyssal Dark Knight, I draw, and with Opart's effect when retired, I call another token, which I'm calling over top of Habitable Zone. 2 Overcoming Eternities in my order zone give my tokens 10k for the turn, which will make this a pretty sweet turn 3. Unfortunately though, just when we think we're getting an advantage over Dan, he gets his overtrigger, so my turn is cut short. Onto Dan's turn, he rides Drajeweled Ignis, a grade 4 that has a couple pretty powerful effects. First though, he's calling Nocturcio, no longer needing to reveal a grade 4 since he's on one, counterblasting 1 to draw a card and put 2 cards from drop into soul again. He then calls out another Zagon, using its skill to soul charge 1 and call out Varpula. This will let him restand a rearguard, and then he calls Rock Argar, which will be restanding itself. At the start of battle phase, Drajeweled Ignis puts 2 cards from drop into soul, and then because he has enough cards with different grades in soul, he gives his entire front row 15,000 power. He guarded the first attack, then no-guarded Rock Argar, but with Drajeweled Ignis skill now when attacking, he can soul blast 5 cards with different grades, but Drajeweled's counting as any grade he wants, to lower my power down to 0. This means I can no longer just tie and shield, because before I had 1 power, but now I need to guard even more. And also Drajeweled gets an extra critical, and retires my entire back row. Varpula will also be using his skill, putting himself into soul because he soul blasted 4 more at a time to restand a rearguard, and then counterblasting 1 to restand Rock Argar. I prefer guard using Elementaria, not discarding a card since the opponent has triple drive. I take Rock Argar's second attack, scoring myself a front trigger for defensive, and then for the next attack I use Creaking World with her skill getting 15,000 shield because Nocturcio has already attacked this turn, so the second attack scores her an extra 15k shield. On my turn I Persona Ride and then start doing my combos to set up more World Orders. Starting with In the Darkness Nobody Knows to retire an opponent's front row rearguard, in this case Rock Argar. I then use Masques effect, removing an original Orfist from hand, soul, or drop from the game in order to set a world order from my drop zone for free. I made sure to soul blast the Orfist first with Polarxis so that I could use it in drop and get the soul for an extra use. I then call out a new Opart and start attacking. Dan uses Tizkar on Guardian Circle when placed energy blasting 3 or counterblasting 1 to draw a card. Orfist goes in this time, counterblasting 1 and removing 3 of my world orders to call a new token over each of my rear guards. And of course with Opart's skill, she'll be replacing herself with another token when retired. Finally, with the Overcoming Eternities, all my tokens get 10,000 power, and Orfist gets an extra drive check on his own because I called 2 or more tokens with his effect. I scored myself 2 heals, meaning I'm still in the fight. Though, judging by Dan's past damage triggers, he's not done anytime soon either. On to Dan's turn, he's calling a Zargon over top of itself just so that he can use the skill and call something from Soul. And then with the reappearance of Varpula, he has basically set up the entire last turn all over again. So, I gotta survive all of that, once again. With Drajeweled Ignis' skill, he's once again putting 2 cards from drop into Soul, allowing himself to give 15k to his front row. I end up having to take this first damage, and then on the next one, I use Panspermia's skill, Energy Blasting 3 to draw a card. This is hopefully going to let me survive, so let's see how it goes. After a perfect guard, Dan gets no criticals, and I think because of that, I've basically been saved for this turn, since I had to take one of those damages. I get my third Persona ride, which I actually drew into because of the Panspermia there. Dan had forgotten that Rock Archer needed to return to Soul because of Zagon's effect, so we just did that now. I'm then using Eclipse Moonlight to call myself a token, and then I'll call Opart, not using her skill because I don't know if I'm actually going to win this turn and I still need a counterblast for Orfist on this turn and potentially the next. I also use Masques effect again, removing an Orfist from my hand to activate a World Order for my drop zone. This time it's Dan having to rely on a Guncycler to hopefully draw into the cards he needs, using Tizkar's skill to draw a card. And, again. And finally, Orfist attacks, counterblasting one and removing all but one of my World Orders to call a full field of new tokens, with each of them getting 5k from the last remaining Overcoming an Eternity. And at 1 to pass, I get it. Look at that, you made it all the way to the end. Thanks a ton. Again, if you're going to be buying cards, which I know you probably are, at least give Ronin cards a checkout and make sure that if you do order anything, use code SHERIFF for 5% off the order. I also want to say that a very small percentage of the people actually watching are subscribed, so I really gotta ask, if you could subscribe, it'd mean the world to me. Beyond that, I really hope you enjoyed the video, and I will be seeing you next time.